Hello and welcome to Face Off here on France 24. Round 1 of the municipal election is behind us. The final verdict will come down next Sunday after the second round, but we already learned a few significant things. First of all, a record low turnout, then a major blow for the ruling socialists, a much-needed victory for the opposition Conservatives, and last but not least, a historic performance by the far-right National Front. With me on the set, Philippe Turle from Radio France Internationale and Denis de Montpion from Le Nouvel Observateur magazine. Before we get to them, let's watch a recap of this very special Sunday night.
His smiling face was the standout image of Sunday's first round. Steve Briouat scoring an outright victory in the northern town Hénin-Beaumont, catapulting the National Front candidate to the position of mayor. For the party's leadership, Briouat's breakthrough was emblematic of the far-right party's nationwide success.
The significance of its great success for our party is that the National Front has now become a strong political force, not just on the national level, but on the local level.
Marine Le Pen's party finished first in some 15 towns across France. In more than 300 areas, the National Front candidate is through to the second round. With the far-right party the big winners so far, François Hollande's Socialist Party are the major losers. The governing party picked up only 38% of the national vote, 9% behind the Conservative UMP. Symbolising the socialist setback, the western town Niort fell to an opposition candidate after 60 years in the hands of the left. On Monday, President Hollande's socialists announced a batch of second-round alliances in an effort to cut their losses.
We have to unite the whole of the left together with the Greens. I'm calling on everyone in every city to rally behind the leading left-wing list and to merge the left-wing and green lists of candidates.
A poor performance in next week's second round could mean change at the top for the president's party. Some analysts say further losses might prompt a cabinet reshuffle for the socialist government.
Denis de Montpion, before we get to the National Front, many analysts are saying that this is really a slap on the wrist for the socialists and especially for François Hollande. Your magazine this week, we'll see the cover is actually very harsh on Hollande, and so is the left-leaning daily Libération this Tuesday. Do you think really the voters went to the ballot box to punish François Hollande?
Well, in fact, what happened? They didn't turn up to voting.
That's why.
That's why actually the socialists were, slammed as they were on Sunday, and it's because it's not that François Hollande doesn't do anything. It doesn't explain what he's doing. Therefore, Hollande came 2 years ago at the power. He was elected and prayed for the growth to come up. Nothing turn up, and therefore you have high unemployment all over the place, and the election is clearly, thrashing for the socialists because people are waiting for some result after 2 years in office, and we don't see up to today how things could change before Sunday, obviously, and it's true that Hollande will have to come up and explain what he's doing, what he wants to do, and how he will manage to redress, as he says, France and its economy.
So, Philippe Turle, an anger vote against François Hollande. This is the first time since the socialists won the presidential and parliamentary elections nearly 2 years ago that the French could vote nationally, and obviously they are not happy with what they're seeing.
Well, there's huge dissatisfaction right across France with the way things are going in this country. If you remember back in 2012, François Hollande said that everyone would have to put their hand in their pocket to help pay to get France back on its feet. 2 years later, people are fed up with the increase in taxes, with paying out to try to bring the economy back, without seeing any sign of that recovery. The first mistake that François Hollande, or one of the mistakes of François Hollande, was to say that by the end of 2013 he would inverse the unemployment rate and make the job market more lucrative from 2014. That hasn't happened. Income taxes have been going up steadily. People are wondering where all this money keeps going to. There's no economic growth to talk of in this country, and the forecast is still very poor. So people say we want unemployment to come down, we want economic growth to come back, we want more spending power. The government hasn't come up with the goods. All we do is pay and pay and pay, and we've had enough, so now we're going to sanction the government because we don't think they're doing the right job. And that, I think, it explains why the National Front has done well this time round. And on the other hand, it might also explain why the right-wing UMP, which, although doing fairly well in this poll, is still suffering from a lot of infighting and fallout. And that has underscored, I think, its ability to do better in these elections.
Denis, lots of voices on the left are begging the president to do something, to ask, and many are thinking, what can you do as a president in France? You can change your prime minister, you can reshuffle your cabinet. According to a poll published this Tuesday, 3/4 of the French are in favor of a cabinet reshuffle, and 69% want the change of prime minister. They don't want Jean-Marc Ayrault anymore. Should the government listen to this, or is it just cosmetics in the end?
I think it's quite cosmetic because anyway, François Hollande would be totally wrong to change his prime minister right away because you have the European election in June. So it gives him 3 months, and in 3 months it's clear that France won't recover. So, that would mean he would waste another prime minister, and for what? For nothing, really, no result whatsoever. So I think the best for him, I'm not at the Élysée Palace.
It's not to change.
It's not to change. Wait until the European election and then do something in order to give a new start to this government.
Okay. I think that the most important thing is that in each mandate that a French president has, which is now 5 years, there is the possibility to change prime minister, but this will only happen once in the 5-year period. So François Hollande is in a situation now as to, well, people want me to change prime minister. Okay, I might change him, but when shall I do it? When will be the best moment for me to do that? Because as Jenny says, if he does it before the European elections, and then there's another hard-hitting rejection of the government policy at that time in June, what's he going to do afterwards? He can't change prime ministers again and reshuffle the government a second time in only 3 months. So he may well wait until after the European elections, but because things are so bad, and I think there is a lot of jittery, skittish feeling in the Élysée Palace right now as to, well, what's the best thing we can do? Okay. He may make the decision to change him straight away, and I think, like Denis says, that probably wouldn't be the right thing to do right now.
Okay, quickly, National Front. Is this a major breakthrough for the National Front?
Clearly, because, you see a party who was, very isolated in the, political landscape, and for the first time, you have a mayor from the National Front elected on the first round. The problem
and also very strong performances in exactly. A dozen or so cities.
And you realize, because I think the National Front won something like 473 seats, on the first round, right. Which is a lot.
Municipal councillors.
And that means that today, although the abstention was very strong, almost 40%, you have a far, extreme right party that can be elected without alliance. Because for a long time in the past, people said, well, they won't manage to get through because they won't, have, the opportunity to make alliance with such and such party. But nowadays, you just, realize that on its own, it can win an election.
It's going to be interesting to see what happens this Sunday in the second round, because in the first round, people often vote with their hearts, a sort of rejection of the government. So they'll vote for the National Front. Now, as we said earlier, there was a high abstention rate, 38%, which is the highest there's ever been in a municipal election in France, which is quite a popular election usually because it's for local officials who people know. 38% is very high. It's the highest since 1959. So if more voters turn out to support the left and the traditional right wing this week, and that will bring down the score of the National Front, because National Front voters are usually quite mobilised and they will vote en masse. Whereas if the other, for the left and the right, don't vote and they abstain, that will obviously increase the percentage score of the National Front. Be interesting to see this weekend how well the National Front does, how many citizen towns it manages to pull off, if there's a greater turnout supporting the traditional parties. And second thing is, what we're seeing in France now, which is a fairly new phenomenon, is that in the old days, the National Front was purely a protest vote against the system. Now the National Front is becoming a bona fide party with its own ideas, and people are voting for the National Front, not as a protest, but because they believe in what they're going to do.
And Marine Le Pen had said repeatedly that those elections are important because the National Front, founded by her father, never managed to get a strong local anchorage, and right. This seems to be happening this time.
And
around.
Actually, it comforts what she's always said. I mean, to have a party which on its own can actually manage municipalities, and not only that, from now to the next by-election, what will happen? They will learn how to manage the city, because in the past, in 1995, for instance, you had 3 towns, Toulon, Vitrolles, and Orange, who had a mayor from the National Front. But they didn't last long because they had no experience whatsoever, apart from Orange. But nowadays, she made, good strategy in order to teach them how to deal with the situation, and then go to the parliament at the next election and be able to be a real force to run the country one day.
Very quickly, and she also has her sights on the forthcoming European elections that we mentioned. She's actually hoping to win them.
Well, traditionally, the National Front will do better in the European elections than in municipal elections in France, as they've done well in these municipal elections. And on one of the reasons for dissatisfaction in France with the ruling parties is Europe. And there's growing rejection of Europe, not only in France, but in many other European countries. And one of the issues the National Front is standing for is a reduced European role, and France recuperating its magnificence of the past and coming out of the Schengen zone, and people are buying into that. So I think that they're destined to do quite well in the European elections, and that also will be another problem which the government is going to have to face afterwards.
Okay, we'll have to see how the National Front fares in round 2 of the municipal elections. We'll bring this live to you next Sunday here on France 24, and we'll comment on the results next Tuesday here on Face Off. See you next week.